Structure to your storytelling is kind of like the skeleton inside the human body. It's gross and nobody wants to deal with it, but it holds everything together. Without structure, your story can suffer from any number of issues, from poor pacing to bad character development. One team of storytellers who've become synonymous with great stories is the animation studio Pixar, creators of amazing films like Toy Story, Finding Nemo, Wall-E, Up, Ratatouille, Monsters Inc., Inside Out, A Bug's Life, Incredibles, Cars, Brave, Coco, and all the other sequels and spin-offs hereafter. And if there's one reason they've been so successful, it's their use of a dedicated story structure format they call the Story Spine. So what is Pixar Story Spine? It's a story structuring device they use to plot out all of their incredible movies and get their stories from beginning to end. Sounds interesting? Well, stick around for the video and I'm going to be talking all about it. I assume you know that, because otherwise, why would you have clicked on this video? In the past, I've talked about screenplay structure. There are 3 acts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. One way to break it down is using the 8 sequence structure, which was actually our very first Leon Unity lesson. However, it's not the only way in which you can break down a 3-act structure for a film or any story in particular. In fact, the 3-act structure can be applied to many different types of stories, from single one-off movies to entire multi-season series. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end to feel cohesive, no matter its size or length. The concept of Story Spine comes from all places a tweet by Pixar story artist Emma Coates, who in 2012 tweeted 22 rules of storytelling. Number 4 was the Story Spine, and it goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a blank. Every day, blank, one day, because of that, until finally, and ever since then. Now, just to clarify, you're not actually saying blank. You fill in the blanks with your own events, and in the process, you create a basic set of events for your story. With me so far? Awesome. Want to learn more about storytelling and filmmaking stuff? Then please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving us a like to help us in the evil war against the algorithm. To the casual observer, it seems simple, and really that's the beauty of it. It is simple. Unlike the more complicated 8-sequence structure or Dan Harmon's story circle, the Pixar Story Spine is just your basic set of events from beginning to end, using the casual once upon a time from fairy tale-like stories. Pretty much any story can fit into this. Here are a few examples from their films. Warning, spoilers for Finding Nemo and The Incredibles ahead. If you don't want to be spoiled, jump to here in the timeline. Once upon a time, there was a clownfish named Marlin and his only son, Nemo, the lone survivor of a barracuda attack where Marlin lost his 400 eggs and wife. Every day, Marlin overprotects Nemo for fear that he'll lose his only son. He patronizingly and aggressively warns Nemo not to swim too far away. One day, however, Marlin embarrasses Nemo so much in front of his new school friends that in an act of rebellion, Nemo swims right up to a fishing boat. Because of that, Nemo is caught by divers and put in a dentist's aquarium, and Marlin is forced to find Nemo. Because of that, Marlin meets a blue tang with a short-term memory loss called Dory, and a whole host of other sea creatures, and go on a wacky adventure together. Until finally, Marlin, with the help of Dory, is reunited with his son, and learns the lesson that he needs to trust his son. Ever since then, Marlin raises Nemo with the help of his new friend Dory, while also giving him freedom the young boy needs. One thing that really helps is with the fact that you learn a lot about your story, and you learn kind of who your protagonist is, because here, as you can tell, it's Marlin. Marlin is the one who goes on the adventure, who, you know, everything happens to as the story progresses. Once upon a time, there was a superhero called Mr. Incredible, when the world outlaws superheroes, is forced to live a life as an ordinary man. Every day he goes depressed and frustrated with his mundane life, working a boring office job, unable to act on his superheroic abilities, and missing out on a life with his family because of his depression. But one day, he is asked by a mysterious stranger named Mirage to take on a secret superhero mission to fight a spider robot thing. Because of that, he gets happier, but he is forced to hide his superheroic missions from his wife, Elastigirl, also a former superhero, and distrust forms between them. Because of that, she activates his tracking beacon to find out what he's been up to, and falls into a trap set up by Mirage's boss, a supervillain named Syndrome, a former obsessive fan of Mr. Incredible who's held a long-time grudge against him for being ignored, and who's also been using Mr. Incredible to gather combat data for a better spider robot thing. Because of that, Elastigirl and the Super Family are forced to try and save Mr. Incredible, and they too get captured, and Syndrome launches an attack on the city without its heroes, using his new upgraded spider robot thingy. Until finally, Mr. Incredible accepts his mistakes, as does Elastigirl, and they restore their trust, enabling to escape, fight together with their kids as a superhero family, and defeat Syndrome. Ever since then, Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl are united as a team. He's more invested in his family, and she is more emotionally flexible, as they now work together as a superhero family. End of spoilers. Now you have some examples, let's break down each section of the Pixar Story Spine and see what they mean. Once upon a time. The classic fairy tale opening is used to settle into the story's characters and setting. Set up time and places happen, who it's happening to, what's the story about, what is their life like, and so on. Doesn't need to be hyper detailed, and that's why it's just a spine, and not the full body. We're talking the basics, just enough so the reader can understand the story, and every day. And here's where we talk about what the daily life is like. What in the 8-sequence structure is often referred to as the ordinary world. What is the cycle of events that must be broken in order for the protagonist's story to really begin? It also helps establish what the consequences of the story will be. Until one day, and we get our inciting incident. The event that propels the protagonist on their journey. Something changes, the everyday routine is broken, and now the story truly begins. There's a focus on the event here. It's different to the actual everyday routine, but we're not quite into what happens next yet. This is just what happens to cause change in the protagonist's ordinary world. And because of that, the protagonist must deal with the consequences of the inciting incident. What happens because of it? It also encompasses concepts of a call to adventure and the decision point, where the protagonist has the chance to begin their journey to attain, restore, or destroy something. The journey begins here because of this, and we enter our second act. And because of that, objectives change. There are consequences to the consequences. This is how you develop the story and the characters with it, how you take them on their paths. The middle point of the story is usually creating tension that forces another because of this. This is the path of the middle section. And you can do as many of these as you feel are necessary, but as a general rule, try to stick to like 2 or 3 to keep it as simple as possible. Until finally, and the story builds and builds to the climax. We are in the third act. What will happen here in this moment of truth? Will we take the story out of limbo and return it to the normal world, or change it irrevocably? This is the grand finale, and it's what your story has been leading to, the success or failure of the mission at hand. And ever since that day, once the climax is complete, the consequences of it are explored. Many fairy tales end with the "and they lived happily ever after," but what does that mean? What is the resolution to your story at the end of it all? How has your journey changed the character or restored them in some way? That's up to you to decide. All stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's no complete story without them. Act 1, 2, and 3. Even this video has that. Once upon a time, there was a every day, one day, because of that, until finally, ever since then, it's a simple chain of events that can really help structure your story. It's not as in-depth as the 8-sequence structure, but it's not designed to replace it. But even the simple act of laying out your story in a structured format can help give it the spine, just help stand it upright. Do you have any ideas on how you can structure a story? And if you'd like me to do a video on explaining them, please leave a comment below, and I'll try reading them out in the next video I do about this. Don't forget, we have free resources on our website, and just down there in the description box to help you, including worksheets for the story spine and the 8-sequence structure. It's totally free, help yourself. If you want to learn and grow as part of our creative community where the story is king, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to stay up to date with all of our latest videos on how to improve your work as a storyteller. Now get out there and create new worlds.